Thank you. So our moderator for this panel is Mr. Layne. I'm going to hand over him because I don't think anybody in this room needs to be introduced to Mr. Layne.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon to one and all. And this panel discussion, social media, privacy, and fake news. We're looking at having this discussion in relation to how can we get to the bottom of these issues. So I've been asked to move the discussion along. They told me to keep the panelists as short as possible. I may see my little dilemma there I may have as we go along, but we're going to try to make it as short as possible in relation to their remarks, because out of this I've been advised that we want to get as many questions from you and online as possible. Now, again, in shortening the introductory remarks and also the summary on each of the panelists, I still think it's important to outline to you who's sitting in front of you in terms of their backgrounds and their interests to this topic. So let's go. First of all, I want to introduce Shariann Walker, and she's been called to the bar in 2016 and is currently an associate at the law firm of Willoughby and Associates. She had advised and represented clients in a number of areas, including employment law, contract law, e-commerce, get this, e-defamation, and privacy law. She's also appeared before the CCJ, the Caribbean Court of Justice, in which she has been part of the successful landmark judgment which she obtained. So congratulations. She holds an LLB from the University of the West Indies and a legal education certificate from Norman Manley Law School. What is interesting for me is that she's worked in having her certification in the foundations of cyber security and IT security. Just coming off of the discussion, we heard a lot about the whole idea of data security and so on. She has a keen interest in the whole idea of cybercrime legislation in the Caribbean, and she published an article from her school days on that particular topic. Ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome Ms. Shariann Walker. Also with us, and no stranger, is Mr. David Ellis, station manager with Starcom Network, moderator of Down to Brass Stats. He served as manager of public affairs for several years. He served periodically as program manager for Starcom Network stations and started his career back in 1974 at the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation, CBC, as a reporter. He worked at Radio Annalise as the director of news and current affairs before returning to Barbados to join what was then known as Barbados Radiofusion. Over the years, he functioned both as journalist and producer, as well as an interviewer who has produced many projects over the years, some of which have earned him both local and regional awards. David Ellis has also been a regional trainer of other journalists in his long and distinguished career in broadcast journalism, and is often invited to moderate discussions and to train executives in techniques associated with communicating with and handling the media. Ladies and gentlemen, please let us welcome Mr. David Ellis. And we also have with us Miss Kerri Gooding. She is the country content manager at Loop News Barbados. She holds a Bachelor of Arts in Linguistics and Psychology with honors from the University of the West Indies. She heads a team of talented journalists and freelancers at Loop News and loves the fast pace of news in today's modern era. Prior to her 2 years at Loop News, where she started as a content reporter, she has worked at the oldest newspaper in Barbados, the Barbados Advocate, and she wrote for all its publications, the Barbados Advocate, Homemakers, the Heat Magazine, Hello Magazine, and the Grenada Advocate. Kerri loves finding the human element in the news regarding of the area, breaking news, business, entertainment, Caribbean news, and whatever. The Queen's College alumni has a knack for connecting with her interviewees and helping them in terms of what they would want to do and what they would like to share as their stories. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Miss Kerri Gooding. Welcome. Now, joining us on this panel, though not physically, will be MC. Yes, that's her name. Her name is literally MC. And she's Facebook public policy manager for Latin America and the Caribbean. And I believe she'll be joining us via the technology we have here to answer some questions and ask some questions. And later on, we may be joined by Bajan Farai.
So the technology is awesome and everything, except when it doesn't work. So we have a technical difficulty, which means that, well, we can see MC on the computer. She can't hear us through the sound system. So unless you were sitting directly in front of the laptop, she wouldn't be able to hear us. So unfortunately, it's not something that we can fix in time for the panel, and she won't be able to join.
Okay. All right, thank you, but we will still be able to interact with her, which I believe is very, very important. So let's start off, and we'll start with our first panelist, Shariann Walker, in terms of her introductory remarks. So take it away.
Hi, good afternoon again, everyone. I wasn't here this morning, but I was following along with the various discussions via the live stream. And certainly something that I saw, or rather heard, arising out of the discussions this morning, particularly the child online protection panel discussion, was a lot of conversation surrounding the perhaps lack of know-how by some adults as it relates to technology and monitoring their children. And in the context of this topic of fake news, social media, and privacy, I think that we must recognize, and I certainly think that many of you do, that social media has really become an integral part of our society, and by a wider extension, technology has fundamentally altered the way we interact with one another. It has affected how we perform our daily tasks, whether that be at home or at work, and it has also affected our job prospects and in respect of the opportunities that present itself in the health and education sector. And given the pronouncements by the newly elected administration and subsequent declarations by the administration since their election to office, what I have certainly seen, or what has been expressed by the administration, is an intention to move Barbados towards a digital economy. It is therefore critical that before the government takes any such steps in that regard, that robust legislation must be enacted in order to protect the data and privacy of the Barbadian citizenry. And I look forward to talking to you more about that topic. Thank you.
Thank you as well. Let's move on. Let's keep it moving. Let's go to our next panelist, Kerri Gooding.
Hi, okay, so just a few pointers for me. Considering how everything is so instantaneous today, what are some of the key points within journalism that I have to push, or that we push for sure at Loop, is that there's no trading facts or accuracy for speed and intermediacy. Like, that is definitely something that we live by. To just touch on each thing in terms of social media privacy and fake news. Social media, it highlights things that persons are interested in talking about and everything, but it does not guide or dictate where the journalist has to go. That's something that people need to understand. We can see something on social media, it is the hype, it is everything that's being followed, but you do not need to carry it. Everything on social media is not necessarily news. That's the truth. In terms of privacy, again, don't compromise accuracy because of its intermediacy. I say that because sometimes you need to get permission. That's always something that we seek out. So sometimes you might go on and there's a very heartwarming story. You want to run with it, but seek permission. Message that person in their Facebook inbox, get a number for that person, get in contact with them. Don't let someone sharing their story with them be how they found out that their story was shared. And in terms of fake news, again, it's always checking in with the authorities first. The amount of times that we get persons sending us videos and pictures of accidents, that's a number one. And sometimes you have to take the time to open up a video, look at the license plates, look at the background, look at what the people are wearing, because sometimes it's a video from 10 years ago, it's a video from Africa, it's a video from Trinidad, and you call the police and they themselves sometimes are annoyed because they're like, at least you checked first and then you called me to confirm, whereas other media are calling me going, so give me the information about this accident not going around on WhatsApp. You're not led by it. Don't let it dictate you. So in terms of fake news, again, you always have to be looking for accuracy, checking your facts and everything. So I guess that's where the discussion will go.
Thank you. Let's go over to Mr. David Ellis.
Well, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I suppose that for us, I'm more representative of the traditional media, trying to make the transition. And, well, it's a reality. We are now in an era where people can stay from home or on the street and communicate with the rest of the country and the rest of the world. More and more people believe, everybody believes that they are a reporter. And there are more people who have been led to believe that they can actually make a living, or at least satisfy themselves, by being able to give news first. We come from a background where you need to develop a certain degree of credibility. If you have the credibility, then more people are supposed to see you as an authority and the authentic source of information. But the truth is, we are caught in two worlds. Some of the people in the traditional media are still trying to hold on to some of what you might consider to be the past, largely because there is still money in the past. And there is a situation where there isn't that much money right now in this new phase for some people. I know that there are new players. Everybody's trying their best to see if they can carve their niche, but the jury is out. And we lag behind. The country as a whole has been lagging behind for far too long. There is an absolute necessity for partnership. And that's why I'm here this afternoon, because I think this whole effort here is part of what we need to encourage. There are a lot of young and not so young people who are part of this movement. There is a mistaken view that this is only for the youth. It is not. You have to bring people at every level into this sphere. One of my most satisfying periods in my life was when a man who is now deceased, a former MP, was using the computer in a way that many people in his age group at the time in the 70s had shied away from. We need the partnership not only in relation to what is happening with the technology, because you and I know it's moving fast, but the legislation, this data protection legislation that has just been put out there for discussion, that was being discussed a short while ago, the European legislation. That discussion that I heard a short while ago is symptomatic of where we are. We have to be pushed by other people. We are not taking the initiative. We're not seeking to understand where we are going. And if there's one key point I want to put before you, is that in as much as the information itself is to be shared by all, I think it is important that those of you who are in the forefront of this particular thrust also strike a balance between what you hold for yourself to make money, because that's a critical part of it, and what you share with other people, so that we can have a greater sense of growth in this area. Thank you.
Thank you too as well. Now, we made to understand that MC can hear us and can speak to us now, so I'll see if we can get some opening comments from her as well. So MC, if you're hearing us, can we get your opening comments?
Perfect. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Awesome. Sorry, I could see your hand gestures before, but I wasn't really sure what was happening. So thank you for that. I'm very happy to be sharing this panel with all of you today, because what I'm hearing is rightful concerns, right, for what can happen in social media and online in general, and how things are changing. So I'll start by saying this. I truly believe, and this is not only because of where I work, but because I've seen this firsthand, that social media and internet tools are one of the great equalizers of our era. And they serve a real purpose in giving everyone a voice. They have low entry barriers, they have low cost, and they have maximized reach. And I understand how that can also be challenging. But in reality, if we're seeking to be a more cohesive society, which I think we are, these kind of tools allow all of us to exercise our freedom of expression in a way. The contest of ideas is unprecedented. We have much more information, much more diverse information. And we also, as consumers of information, have many more choices from where to draw the information. I think one of my fellow panelists was signaling how do we go about discerning what to read, what to share. And that's exactly one of the issues that we can work together on. I would also highlight that we are very aware, and especially at Facebook, we have around 2 billion people using the platform every month. And we're very aware that the bad and the good can coexist in the platform, and we are very interested always in hearing from our users everywhere in the world and from our partners everywhere in the world to minimize the risks and maximize what I was saying before, the availability of a platform that can help people raise their voices. We know there will always be bad actors, right? Those who are spreading hate speech or false news, those who try to take advantage of the platforms to engage in criminal activity. So the question here is, how do we design, let's say, new social rules or new rules for living together in the online world? And those don't necessarily have to be regulations. I think the pace of technology has shown one thing, is that it goes so fast that if we wait and see for, every country having a legislation or a regulation before we agree on, as a society, how to go about treating these challenges, then we might lose the boat, right? And we might be overwhelmed by everything that happens online. There's still a lot of work to do on internet penetration, especially in the Caribbean region, and to close the digital divide. I think that access should be the first thing that we think about, because giving access can give empowerment to reach and fight for the other basic rights, right, that we need to keep fighting for. Now, this has to be accompanied by transparency and accountability as well by everyone in the online world. And I'll say that one thing that I wanted to highlight is that the internet and social media platforms, like, we don't exist in the wild, wild west, right? We don't exist in a regulatory void. We actually have a lot of self-regulation and a lot of accountability mechanisms to our users, to governments, to civil society organizations, to our users, let's say like journalists, like some of you sitting here with me on the panel, who constantly push us to measure our performance and to improve what it is we're doing. So I thank you for making us a part of this conversation. I am very happy to see that Barbados is embracing this multi-stakeholder approach to internet issues like this one. And I would be happy to deep dive a little bit later on not only what we as Facebook have done around the whole false news and fake news phenomenon, but also some tips that we as users can always keep in mind when we're about to share information, right? So how can we all be responsible? Because I think this, and ultimately, this discussion should lead us to how are we all co-responsible, right, for creating the right online environment. So thank you very much for having me.
Okay, and thank you for being with us as well. Now, I know you're supposed to be gathering up your questions and so on. I'll ask one or two, and then we come to the audience. And I want to start where MC left off. Now, MC spoke about it, David spoke about it in terms of the speed and movement of technology. Technology moves fast. Legislation doesn't move fast. In terms of creating it, in terms of getting it passed, proclaimed, and even in terms of amending it. We're now amending a lot of laws from 1929 and 1964. So my question to you, Shariann, is how do we kind of fix that anomaly between the speed of technology and the speed of legislation? What are some of your recommendations?
Well, that's a good question, Corey. Unfortunately, because of the very nature of our judicial system, no matter where you are in the world, this is certainly not unique to Barbados. All over the world, you have countries that are struggling to keep up with the rapid pace of technology. For instance, let's look at the Computer Misuse Act. Perhaps I would also say that might be a probable failing of our own legislators to keep up with the amendments of that act, but that act came into force since 2005. We are now in 2018, and no amendments have been made since it was enacted in 2005. And as we all know, because of the rapid nature of technology, at the time, I believe Facebook was in its infancy stages, Snapchat didn't exist, Twitter, I don't believe that existed either, and Instagram as well was also in its infancy stages, and we failed to amend the legislation accordingly. And I think that's why, well, with this recent administration now, they have made available to the public the draft data protection bill, and that certainly is a positive sign. So if you are in this space, the ICT sector, or you are concerned as to your privacy rights, I would encourage, I don't know if it was mentioned earlier, but I would encourage persons to submit their comments online. I believe it's the Ministry of Business, Entrepreneurship, and Commerce, their website, and you can look at, I encourage everybody to look at the bill, see how your rights can possibly affect it, and if there are any concerns that you have to comment. And in that way, the public shares in the advancement of the legislation so that it can serve the population better.
Okay, just a quick follow-up question. Now, one of the proposals coming out of the present administration is to have a committee established to continue to look and review laws right across the board consistently. Do you think that that is something that would assist with something like technological law?
Yes, absolutely, and I think it's a good sign from the administration. Again, it's certainly, it appears as though they are concerned as to the slow pace of justice, and the commission will be, as I understand it, what has been reported so far, it appears as though they would be responsible for reviewing outdated legislation and suggesting amendments to that legislation. So I think that will definitely assist in moving legislation along, and certainly legislation that would govern whether it be privacy rights, data protection, and other technological advancement that we see coming out.
Okay, MC, this one is to you. We obviously know of the recent failings within Facebook and the amendments and also the changes that you guys are making, but specifically to the Caribbean, what type of public policy are you guys looking at, especially as it relates to things like privacy, fake news, and e-defamation? If I can pull from Shariann Walker's bio, what are some of the things that y'all are putting in place seriously to look at these ills?
All right. You ask a very relevant question here when you mention the Caribbean. We are a global platform. We operate as such. And so none of our users are excluded from all of our policies and all of our improvements. So I'll highlight a couple of things that I think would be useful for us to continue in dialogue. Facebook has a set of community standards, and these are very carefully built and designed and changed throughout time to create sort of our own set of rules that that allow all of our users and all of us who use Facebook to coexist in a peaceful way and using the platform to the best of our abilities to exercise our rights. I really do invite all of you to go ahead and take a look at those community standards. I realize that a lot of the times we use online services and obviate for the terms and conditions, and we just kind of click accept and go. I really do think that at Facebook we've been doing a much better job of putting those terms in a language that we can all understand. And so very recently, I'm going to say 2 months ago, we actually released globally the way we enforce these community standards. And what do I mean by that? The community standards basically state what can happen and what's allowed and what is not allowed in the platform. So what we don't allow criminal activity, we don't allow self-harm or suicide content, we don't allow harassment, we don't allow many things that constitute sort of bad behavior. Now, that doesn't mean that it doesn't happen on the platform. What it means is that because we don't allow it, we have a way, when we have rules, that we can check upon users' reports that, hey, this what happens with that content. Generally, we have a team of folks around the world working 24/7 to review all these reports that users give us. And it's important to notice that we do this because so everyone on the platform is responsible for keeping the platform safe. Not only Facebook, because if we were to do it proactively, then that would mean that we would become censors of the content. And that's not what we are. We are a platform, and we want to make sure that everybody has a chance to express their views. Now, these rules, what we did was also, I told you, we published sort of the way we enforce them. And we also went ahead and did our first transparency report for how we enforce these rules. So we are putting out there a lot of transparency and accountability so that anyone who wants to join Facebook or who is part of the Facebook community can know exactly what happens with a piece of content that they reported or that was reported that they actually had published, or what happens in general, let's say with hate speech content or with IP content or defamation content, the one you mentioned before. So the rules we try to make the rules fairly simple so that anyone can enforce them internally and understand them externally. I think it's an evolving process. So what I would love to do over time with taking advantage of this opportunity that you granted us to participate in the Barbados IGF and also with other Caribbean countries who might be interested, is receiving more feedback into what you think are sort of key issues that are happening more and more in the region that you fear are going to escalate into something, let's say, worse, or into something in real life, or that you think should be dealt with on a different way. I think we are very open to working with civil society groups, governments, journalists, academics, and our users to really understand sort of the minutiae, right, of cultures. The rules are one set for the whole world. And that's because really our mission is to provide a place for people to connect and build communities. And so we don't have specific rules for specific countries. What we do is really try to build this global community.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not sure if that answers your question precisely, but I did want to highlight that the importance of taking a look at these rules, that we do hold ourselves accountable and put it out there in transparency methods so that all of you can hold us accountable or appeal our decisions or make sure that you give us feedback.
Okay, no, it was answered because I do believe that it is important for the platforms to do a level of governance and management because it's easier than to wait on legislation. So well answered. Last question from me, and this is to Kerri and David. Kerri, you spoke about getting it accurate, not sacrificing it at the altar of speed. But news mean new. People want things new and right now. And Mr. Ellis, you've always said, technology is not the enemy. You must embrace it. But do you really see a time, and this for both of you, do you really see a time when social media actually overruns traditional media? People want things now.
We just came out of an election period, and I can definitely tell you that during elections, you saw where social media won. For example, it was instantaneous. We went live so many times during elections. I mean, you went live on a prayer, I kid you not, because you were going with this person is on the political platform, and I believe they're only going to say what they're going to say and nothing else. And you said a prayer, and honestly, it did not always work out how you wanted it to work out, because I will be honest, some people got really dirty on the political platform. And there were times when you actually had to end lives. I mean, it was just the truth of the matter. I mean, you can put that into writing, but to let a person use your platform to get that message even further is something that you had to make a judgment call on. For example, I remember people calling me and going, hey, weren't you at that meeting when he said this thing? But I don't remember seeing it on the live. And I'll be honest, as soon as I saw the person going in that direction, I cut it. I did the story on it, but he didn't get to use our platform to do that. Whereas persons who were there recorded it and then they sent it on WhatsApp and everybody saw that little segment of what he said. Again, sometimes it's because the person took that one part out of context. In that situation, it might not have been, but I'm just saying that because of the immediacy and the fact that sometimes you have to do it. To show you on the flip side, I was in St. John when St. John's boxes were being called. And when the first set of boxes came back in St. John, to be the person who had went live when that, when he came back and he gave the boxes and I went outside and I ran outside and I got the response of the St. John people, like, that's something that I couldn't even put into words if I did not have the live. Like, people didn't understand how much the people in St. John wanted this. Like, I mean, all the weeks leading up, you were writing about how St. John might break, it might not. You had all the people who were adamant St. John will stay deep. But in that second, when I went outside there and they heard those first 3 boxes, it was tears, screams. Life could not be deep.
So answer the question, you're saying you do see it taking over tradition. Okay.
In certain instances.
instances. Okay.
I think it's risky to think that with defamation laws being what they are, that you're going to just surrender yourself to social media in that way. Very risky. And I think that there will, for quite some time, remain a critical role for somebody to be the filter. But news is not just about what any politician says on any platform. News is analyzing what people say. News is about going into communities and getting people's reaction to what is happening. Ultimately, it is about serving people in that way. There is a vital role for the news media to get up out of the office and go out to the people and get a sense of what is happening to the people. This is where we are failing all too often. And the notion that you have access to a speech, and I do applaud 100% the fact that I could stay from my home right now and watch any political meeting in a campaign season. And I was able to stay from my home at any time and watch the recent consultation, this week's consultation on planning development in Barbados. That's all crucial. But beyond that, it is changing our role in a sense, because we have to react more quickly in looking at its implications. So if you have a speech today, this morning at 10 o'clock, you don't want to hear at 12:30 tomorrow a piece from that speech. Tomorrow morning, what you want to hear is, what is the reaction to it? How is it touching people's lives? Whereas in the past, you could wait till the next morning and pull another piece out of the speech and give people the impression that you're giving them something new. People want freshness. And the question that we have to confront in this region, in this country, is not so much the fake news, it's the stale news. That's what we have to confront. and the extent to which we are sitting down and allowing the political directorate and the politicians generally to dictate the pace as to what people must hear and what is important to people. And I believe that is the pressure that it exerts on us as media practitioners. If we are to survive, we have got to do things differently, and we have to be more responsive. Most of all, we need to be aware of what is going on. And I want to say, it's all well and good to tell people you go online, pull down a piece of legislation, and look at it and determine whether it's good for you or it's bad for you. This data protection legislation, I called a friend of mine who's a lawyer and asked, what do you think? How could we make an input? And she said to me, that's not my area. You need somebody who deals with that. Because all lawyers can't deal with everything. So that's where the partnership comes in with organizations like yours now. Because we are in difficult times financially. Organizations are stretched trying to do this, that, and the next, and looking at the IMF and looking at what the government doing before we get to the IMF and trying to narrow the gap between the two and all the things like that. So in those circumstances, if you have a choice between taking your money and spending it on something else and getting a lawyer to give you an opinion on that, do you think that happen? You're not going to get that opinion. So the people who are the specialists in the area need to work with us, all of us, not with just my organization, but we should be working with all of us to see what is this piece of legislation demanding of us? Where is it going to put us? And how do we protect our own interests before it is passed? Okay?
Thank you. Okay, we're going to go over to the audience and start to take your question. We got the first question right here, the request, and then we go from there. So let's go.
Thank you very much. Rodney Taylor, Chair of the ISOC Barbados chapter. And my question is actually to anyone, which is, do people really want filters on their news, or do they want it live and direct from multiple sources? I mean, Stephen here is on Facebook fairly often. I watch his videos sometimes. But very often, and I even listen to some of the call-in programs, of course, which you're both moderators on. And it seems to me like the same people kind of call all the time. You know them by name, and you kind of know where they're going. And some of them even accuse, of course, the moderators of bias, political biases, or, pushing an agenda, and so on. So, I mean, obviously, but the social media gives everybody that direct platform to voice their opinions, whether it's the snow cone man, whether it's the coconut vendor. He has an opinion too. He may not be an expert, but he knows how he has been affected personally by some law or some change in legislation or regulation, whether it's done, selling coconuts by the side of the road or something. He has his own personal experience. And so there's value in that direct communication channel with people who we may not consider to be experts in a particular field.
All right, who's going to take that one?
I would like to take it, because I want to say to you that those of us who sit as moderators can also tell you about the many Barbadians who are reluctant to let their voices be heard, and who call us and call the same people that you hear every day to speak on their behalf because they don't have the courage to come out and be heard. They will tell you their sister working in the ministry, or their daughter working with some government, or they got to get a contract and they're frightened to be heard. And a lot of that happens. We want to encourage people to express their views themselves. Many times I tell them, don't ask me I'm not speaking on your behalf, because people know my voice and my views ever since. You will have more of an impact if you speak directly. And not only within projects like Brass Stats, but within the news and stuff like that. I mean, more and more organizations are trying to encourage what's called citizen journalism. But of course, there are a lot of people who don't want to go there. But the final point I want to make is this. It's this thing about filters. It's one thing to say you don't want filters, but you got a Computer Misuse Act, and you have defamation, And in certain circumstances, it seems it may be difficult to get at people, like with the naked departure and that sort of thing. But in other circumstances, you can be reached. And many people we have found, they are not sensitive enough to the nuances of the defamation law. And that's where it becomes exceedingly risky to believe that you can just go like that. That's one of the reasons why in the last election campaign, we never risk putting any campaign meeting on live. Because I don't know what's coming at me. And when people get excited, they say all sorts of things. I think they even defame me. So, you know.
Well, just one thing that you were saying in terms of persons wanting to get what they're saying out there, getting their stance out there. We always do vox pops, as he was talking about going into the public and getting the public's opinion. So every time, just as he said, especially with this new government, they are doing a lot of lives. They're going for the very transparent look. So if once upon a time, a journalist could have said, the Prime Minister spoke for 30 minutes. I'm going to write my story from the first 10 minutes. I'm going to hold my story for tomorrow morning from the 20th minute, and then I'm going to do another story the evening from the 30th minute. Now, because a person sat down and watched the whole 30 minutes live, any story that you bring from within those 30 minutes, they've heard it all. So, as he said, what we do is as soon as that 30 minutes clicks, one person is working on all stories from that 30 minutes. Videographer and somebody else is in town, or they're in a barber shop or a hair salon, because you now need to find out how the public is going to respond to that, and quickly like that, you have the vox pop. But to show where the problem comes, again, with the citizen journalism, it's something that I believe we need to start in schools, because we have so many adults that you go and you put a microphone in front of them and you say, hi, tell me, how do you feel about this legislation that's coming into play? I ain't got nothing to say to that. I don't have anything to say to you. You move and you go to Shariann, and Shariann starts talking. You know who's walking all around you in the background? The guy who didn't want to talk. Tell her about, but don't forget to tell her. And so, sir, would you like to give your cup? I ain't got nothing to tell you, but tell her. That's what we face when we go out there to get the public's response.
Thank you. We'll take another from the audience, and then we go to online comments as well.
Okay, my question has to do with, given that we've it's been highlighted, the lack of immediacy of some of the traditional media, and within the context of social media, we have perhaps a lack of context, persons not necessarily being able to differentiate between what is factual from what is not. You're just exposed to everything. Do you, all of you, see a future where the best of the two mediums are sort of distilled into a single entity that has all the best characteristics of both?
I think you have a combination of it right now, you know. There are many stories that start on social media, but are then investigated by the established media to get more out of it. Because the average person who has seen something happen does not get into the nitty-gritty of why. What are the factors? That's what we are paid to do, or that's what we ought to be doing, as distinct from what we may be.
I want to come to you, MC, though. We spoke about defamation, we spoke about privacy and so on, the community standards and so on. Now, in relation to fake news, what are some of the mechanisms you guys have in place? Now, I know you have billions of users. It must be very difficult to police everything that everyone posts. But what are some of the mechanisms that you all have in place to like fact check certain things that are being put out there to kind of reduce the level of fake news?
Perfect. So the first thing here is that we don't fact check that. We're very different from a traditional media outlet. We're not editors of the content at all. Okay. We are a platform. So what we do, and this is important, is our main partners on this effort and are making sure that information flows truthfully, let's say, are precisely traditional media outlets, right? Everybody who like my panelist, my fellow panelist was describing, dedicates their life to doing journalism, right? And that's not us. We do technology, okay? So, but we have done a series of things on the platform that I think have helped reduce dramatically the spread of false news, because that's what we can do. So once something is up on the platform, our job is to make sure that if it's bad content or if it's negative content in that sense, then we take care of the technology to make sure it doesn't spread more than it should, okay? And we've done several things. First is we partner with traditional media outlets, and we've just started this process, so bear with us while we get to all the countries around the world to do partnerships on fact checking. So basically, the fact checking is done by a media outlet, and what we do is we integrate into the way we rank the news feed, the way you see your news on Facebook, or your news about friends and your news about anything you follow on Facebook. We integrate those signals. So if we hear from our partners that a particular Facebook page or a particular entity on Facebook is publishing things that are false or blatantly false or that are clickbait, for example, then that gets taken into account, and we are able to downrank the relevance of that page or of that entity on Facebook so that it doesn't appear as much on people's news feeds. Okay. That's one thing. We are also able to determine upon investigation, thanks to the report that we get from our partners, whether these folks are using, let's say, Facebook ads to spread their content. Then we can cut that right away, because you should not. That's against our rules to use our advertisement tools to spread false information. And finally, is that we do work a lot with, and we're starting to do this more around the region as well. Work with academics and with schools and with journalists to spread all these tips around how we as users can spot false news. So you can actually find this on your own Facebook if you use it. On the help section, you can find 10 tips that we have. So be skeptical of headlines, look closely at the links, investigate the source, because in the end, as my fellow panelists were saying, when it's a real story, it comes from a real source. And watch for unusual formatting or dates that don't match. Consider the pictures. Sometimes we've heard a lot about, this violent act is happening, or this disaster happened in this part of the country, and it turns out to be an image from another country, from another natural disaster. Inspecting dates, checking your evidence, looking at other reports. So that's another tool that we've started to roll out around the world, which is when we get all these signals from our partners that a story can be false, we are actually they are able to write a story about it, and then we are able to say, hey, look at these related news. If you don't see
related news things, I
or if you can't find anything else online around this same topic, then it's probably a fake story. So, and the reason
let the surfer beware.
Sorry?
There's a saying, let the surfer beware.
Exactly.
All right, MC, we gotta go back to the audience. So let's just stick a pin there, and I go back to the audience. We come back to you.
Go ahead.
Okay,
Go
let's
ahead.
go.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Heather Headley. MO Productions and MN Publishing, creative arts companies. I'm not one of those who shies away from comments and social commentary. I've spoken with Mr. Ellis on many occasions on radio. My question pertains to the use of social media for social justice and activism, and the nexus between what the social media represents and journalism. Because I do agree with Mr. Ellis that there's a place for both. But if we negate the instant reaction or the instantaneous reaction, we damage ourselves, and I'll explain what I mean. If we look across the technologies, we know that what is happening in Europe or the Middle East or in the United States, Canada, or Africa, we have instant information which we may not have accessed previously because we had a reliance on the media, and the media that was slower. But in this regard, when social activism, whether it's about bigotry or lack of diversity in any jurisdiction, we then, as the public, and especially people who are artists and activists, have an opportunity to receive and be informed. And then the journalists, along with us as a viewing public, can have that nexus. So when I see something happening in another part of the world, I may call in, or here in Barbados, I may call in and speak to it, because I'm getting the social media at one end, so it's instantaneous, but I still want to have that kind of discourse. And I think that is something that we might be missing. There is a very good nexus, but we have to manage. I think the opportune thing is to manage information. I think news, I commend you. Live streaming is important. There are people who are disabled and they can't get out. So when you are able to access, but I know, Mr. Ellis, you have a delay system. And that delay system, I don't know if the technologist here could speak to that. A delay system so that when something is streaming, you can actually interrupt. I know it happens on radio, and that is something that I would want.
We have been having problems trying to do that via the social media, though. Maybe we have to look for more advice on it. But I'm not negating live streaming. I think we need more of it. In the same way that the government is doing it, I applaud, for instance, the Barbados Association of Professional Engineers, not only for the kind of forum that they have been mounting recently looking at specific issues, but the fact that they have made it available, at least a part of it, in live stream. We encourage that, but you need to be selective sometimes, depending upon dangers associated with taste and associated with the law.
Yeah. On that point, I want to entreat our governments across the Caribbean to be more proactive in our legislative framework. I mean, we're signatories to a lot of international conventions. We've been talking about intellectual property and hacking and theft. So we really have to get on board as soon as possible.
Okay, thank you very much. We take the next question, comment.
Good afternoon. My name is Mohammed Charles, graduate from University of the West Indies, Spanish with Linguistics. My question is directly to MC. I'm just curious, what does Facebook exactly define as harassment or hate speech? I ask this question because there have been cases where people have deliberately reported even the most legitimate criticisms of ideas as harassment and hate speech, and have been silenced as a result. So I just want to hear what's Facebook's definition of these two terms.
Yes, checking here. Give me 1 second because I want to make sure I give you the exact definition. So if you go to facebook.com/community standards, and I really encourage you doing it, it's written in a very simple form. So I'll read sort of what are how we do it. It's not, we don't define a specific act as harassment, but we do take into account context and intent. Okay, and this is what's very challenging for our community operations team, who's reviewing all these user reports. We get millions of them a day. Now, when our advice to users is the following: repeatedly contacting a single person despite that person's clear desire and action to prevent that contact, that would constitute harassment on our platform. Okay, or repeatedly contacting large numbers of people with no prior solicitation, or sending a message to an individual that contains cursing to a group of individuals or an individual, in that thread, calls for death or serious disease or disability, sort of attacks on a specific characteristic. I would be more on the hate speech side. Bullying, violations, and claims. Let's say that someone misleading. Let's say that someone committed an act based on misleading information, whatever. So you have very specific, in facebook.com/community standards, you'll have very specific advice on what not to do on our platform and what to do. So it's not a one definition thing, but it's more of a how do we take into account context and intent. And that's very difficult language-wise and cultural-wise. So we learn all the time about this, and that's why we introduced what I told you at the beginning, which is the appeals process. So if you think, or anyone around you thinks that we made the wrong decision based on a report, you are now able to appeal that back to us, and we can take a second look. For hate speech, it has to be something an attack based on an individual characteristic. We include over 10 characteristics like race, ethnicity, gender, gender identity, a bunch of other things, national origin, whatnot. So we go beyond sort of the international definition to make sure that we take into account a lot of the context that we see around the world. But please do go check facebook.com/community standards for this.
Okay, thank you. I think there are no other burning questions, so we'll turn back over to the panelists. MC, we'll start with you in terms of wrapping up. There's one other burning one, I think. Is it you? All right, go quickly.
Yeah, just one quick question for MC. You just jogged my memory. My name is Matthew Tull with the Caribbean Examinations Council. I've actually discovered that a few of our online users have been using the reviews field as a way to spread their own hateful or even negative reviews for their own personal experience, which doesn't necessarily relate to the institution as a whole, but they're just using it as a vent. And we can't delete them, but we've made appeals and nothing's really happened. My question is there another way of perhaps getting you guys to be, I guess, quicker in interceding on our behalf, really?
Look, to be honest, this is an iterative process for us. We improve every day, hopefully. We keep improving every day. And I very much appreciate you bringing this on. I'm not aware of the particular case or the particular issue here with review comments. I do think that there are several options in the meantime that you can use. You can actually block comments on your platform, on your page. You can answer directly, which is a lot of sort of social media etiquette in a way. I don't think from your comment what's happening is probably unfair. So I don't know that there's one way to get us to respond more quickly. Our team is looking at millions of reports every day. I do think that here context will matter a lot. If you report it, make sure that you can help us with a lot of the context. And happy to follow up later more personally on this. Now, as far as closing, I just want to say that thank you very much for having us here and allowing us to be a part of the conversation. Like I mentioned at the beginning, this is very helpful to us in hearing sort of your concerns at a very local level for us. And I would say something, I reiterate sort of where I started, is that social media has turned out to be a great equalizer. For folks, someone in the audience mentioned this opportunity to use online tools as a tool to raise their voices, to do social activism, to hear about what's happening around the world and to find support and to build those communities really. Let's embrace that in a way that allows us as societies to become better to each other. And at the same time, let's use those avenues that my fellow panelists have mentioned to review regulations, to review our social norms, to review sort of between each other how we behave, to educate each other from teachers to students to teachers, academia, civil society, etc., to make sure that we use these tools in the best possible way. I'm happy to be part of this conversation, and I really do hope that we have many, many more. So thank you very much.
And thank you. That was MC, and she is the Public Policy Manager for Facebook for the Caribbean and Latin America. We are completely out of time, so I want to take this opportunity to thank our other panelists, Mr. David Ellis from Starcom Network, Inc., Shariann Walker from Willoughby and Associates, and Kerri Gooding from Loop News. I am Layne. I have been your moderator, and I want to thank you for your attendance and your questions. Thank you very much.